As usual, we can start off with a prayer for teacher and student. By now you know it. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditam Astu Mahavidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So, as usual, I'll mute myself while you formulate some suitable question.
Like to increase the earning and the relationship with the Ishtadevata, we use our creativity and imagination during our meditation. And sometimes you see things and feel things. And I have this doubt, is it the relationship and the bonding increasing, or is it just that you're making things up? So how do we do that?
Yes. Yeah. So one principle we have to be confident of, and that is whatever thought, as we say, comes to our mind, and whatever feeling comes to us, whatever impression, in other words, overall that comes into our mental field, is a flow of divine grace. Now, of course, some things also come up from the unconscious impressions as well. But when we notice that and start exploring it, the exploring element is a flow of divine grace. So when we sit for meditation, let us say, it is not to acquire anything. It's not to acquire divine grace. It is to experience the flow of divine grace already present and already flowing, and it comes as thought. And so when we align ourselves with the source of this thought, that is cosmic mind, then we can call this divine inspiration. How to distinguish between divine inspiration that comes as a flow to us, where we say it came to me, and something of our own that we inserted from the subconscious mind. And in any event, both require image making. We cannot have any word without any concept. And so we have to examine that. And the way we examine it is as we are doing automatically, knowingly or unknowingly, as a witness. As you're processing a thought, it is possible for you to put yourself in a position of witness to observe a flow of how the divine current, because it's all divine current, is flowing. Now, what do we mean by that? Do we have an analogy? I'll give the usual analogy. The usual analogy is there is a flow within an electromagnetic field that has many, many permutations and variations of different waves. And one of these waves will be the electrical wave, electrical current. And we can see that it is arriving to us as different frequencies and so on. And we have different corresponding equipment to catch the wave that we want. So all of this electrical current that flows within the sphere of the electromagnetic wave system, all of this is the metaphor for the divine grace flowing. This divine grace is always flowing. It's flowing now and we call it life. It's flowing now and we call it thought. It's flowing now and we call it the internal, intangible feeling which we cannot put on a table or a chair. We cannot put in a test tube. It's not an object in a spatial sense. And so these are subtle things that come to us. And so when we use our imagination, it is not, we can't just dismiss it and say it's just our imagination, and our imagination may be creating something, because there's no such thing as your personal imagination. Image making is the natural arrangement whereby we put a picture to, or a form, if you will, to some kind of word, some kind of language, some kind of concept. Now, when we intensify our imagination, when we, let us say, enhance the clarity of it. For example, supposing we imagine there's a lotus flower in the center of the heart. Then we can then dwell on that a little bit. And like an artist, we can increase the depth of the color. You know, the wonderful thing in Indian culture, let's say, is that instead of putting sequence somewhere, they put an abundance of sequence. They make things sparkling. Gold is enhanced to be ultra goldish gold, even though it may not be authentic. That's the kind of thing, so that we have the capacity to increase the creative value of our imagination. What is the difference between our imagination and what we typically call a reality? Well, we have to understand what we mean by these terms. This world, I'm not sure if we can classify it as a reality, even though that's our assumption. If you talk to anybody in the realm of scientific discovery, for example, or scientific theory, they will assume that reality means what we see, what we touch. It is the sense reality. And but as scientific investigation goes a little deeper, a little further, that reality becomes very flaky. The most tested theory we have, the most valid theory that is enabling this interaction, this technical interaction, is a quantum theory. And the quantum principles is the most important, significant, tested, and reliable theory that anybody has in physics or ever has had. It's completely reliable, but completely mystical. Mystical because how can you have two subatomic particles, let's say electrons, or one electron, being in different places at the same time, you know? And so the almost strange and absurd nature is only because we're evaluating it from things which are big, things which are stable, things which are tables and chairs and all the rest of it. And in order to imagine the most subtle, we have no other method except to make symbolic representations, using language, using concepts, and so on. Because nobody has ever seen these things. In this same way, you may say, with ordinary sight, nobody has seen this ultimate source aspect of reality, which religion calls the divine or God or your individual personal chosen ideal. And it's an ideal that is representative of something deeper, which reveals itself the more we dwell on it. Now, the more we dwell on it, it means the more we put in our artistic, creative imagination. The more we invest in that, the more it reveals itself. Because we are really prodding it, as it were. Come on, reveal yourself, reveal yourself, reveal yourself. And the yearning comes from several different directions. Firstly, it comes from a direction of mere curiosity. I want to know what is the truth. The second aspect of the yearning comes from the emotional aspect, which really understands that the source of everything is not myself as interpreted individually, egoistically, my body-mind arrangement, which I put a label on of I, and don't understand, this is only for passport purposes. That's all. So the principles of philosophy will help us to understand that theoretically, what I assume to be a so-called reality is only in the relative field. It's only in relation, in other words, to something else that sees it, that observes it. And ultimately, it's in relation to an ultimate perceiver. Now, how to connect with that ultimate perceiver, we will really, really want to do it. And the intensity of that want, of that desire, is what we call yearning. Yearning is taking desire to its penultimate, where we eat it, we drink it, we sleep it, we are obsessed by it. It becomes our magnificent obsession. And so the emotional side of that yearning involves the feeling that we would normally have with any sense desire. A person desires to be close to somebody else. A person desires for other objective things. And that is why Sri Ramakrishna combines these kinds of desires to say the kind of yearning that you want is a combination of these things. A miser for his money, that desire for that. When you said yearning to start with, I heard earning. But yearning, okay, yearning to be wealthy, yearning to hold on to that, a yearning or that element of desire that a partner has in a human relationship for the other person, a yearning for that reciprocal love to take place. And the path of love uses these kinds of language. Love of God. What quality of love should be there? Well, with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength, your whole being. In other words, all your energy, whether it is thought energy, whether it is feeling energy, whether it is physical energy, all your energy, that is gathering all your energy into one place, and through the power of attention, pouring it out in one direction as much as you possibly can. And the more you do that, the more you direct your energy, the more the yearning increases. Because part of the absence of the desired result will be exactly that. I'm not getting where I want to be, but I am getting glimpses. And the more I get these glimpses, then the more the yearning intensifies. And it requires my small stimulus on the one side, and that acts as a kind of opening for divine grace to flow in from the other side, so to speak. And so the more we prod this, the more we interact, the more we meditate, the more we pray, the more we do our japa, the more we engage in dedicated action, the more we do all of these things that we summarily call yoga, the more we do these things, the more this grace flows in, and the more it becomes more satisfactory and satisfying. And we have to prepare ourselves for obstacles in this way. It is described, for example, the devas. Let us imagine a collective group of beings, universal managerial staff, administrators. Well, you see, in the mythological understanding, one of the things we have to do is, in all the standard sacrifices, yajnas that we do, one will be satisfying these devas. Now, supposing we take our attention and say, I no longer wish to do this. I want to dedicate myself to what is behind you, your own creator, your own author. I want to go now to my Ishta Devata, this cosmic mind in this form. And the more my spirituality develops, well, the less pleased these deities will be. And so they will try and thwart us and present obstacles for us. This is a mythological way of understanding some obstacles in spiritual life. And so we have to overcome these obstacles by, in a way, seeing through these devas. Now, one of the ways of doing it is not to see it separate from our Ishta Devata, because these are all divine graces that are flowing, and we personalize these as devas. And the beauty about the ancient Vedic religion, if you wish to call it this, is it doesn't eliminate anything, it adds everywhere. See, in the Greco-Roman world, they never did that. In the Greco-Roman world, they had the pantheism, pantheon of deities. They had polytheism, and polytheism was supplanted, and the meaning of the polytheism was supplanted ultimately by monotheism, and the polytheism fell away. But you see, if there was any polytheism in the Vedic religion, it was kept. And then a different interpretation was read on the top, and a deepening of understanding. In other words, you don't throw it away, you make it still useful. The old tools are still useful, you just use them in a different way now. So what we call devas really would be the illuminating factors as they were originally intended, which manifest gradually by their combinations and permutations into the universe that we see. In other words, in scientific language, it's the quantum world of appearing and disappearing elements in a quantum void, the quantum vacuum, a kind of field not understood, where things bubble up, appear and disappear. And when you have things happening bigger, in other words, the bigger cluster, if you will, probably, then we get the world that we see, which seem to be a world of particles. But we know that actually the fundamental elements are all kind of certainly wave-like. They are certainly exhibiting wave-like behavior and can be seen as waves, no doubt, appearing as particles, no doubt. This word appearing gives us the clue, and should give every scientifically minded person a clue that something is appearing as something else. And that gives way to an interpretation of something as something else. So we can see, if we have a mind to see it, that everything, every one of these things, which we originally interpreted in an individual way, is now re-understood as like rays of the sun, manifested energies of the one thing. So that means that everything leads us back to its origin. There is no such thing, therefore, as any disturbance in meditation. And the more we imagine, the more we steer that, the more it becomes an opening to receive divine grace on the other side and satisfy our yearning. The more we are able to drink from the nectar that flows. By prodding the honeybee's nest, we get a flow of nectar. And so the individual jiva, by forming this relationship in three alternative ways, each one deepening our understanding, but certainly starting off as three different approaches. My Lord is on the one side. I wish to have you revealed. I wish to see you. What is the goal of my life? The goal is a vision of you, a vision of your presence. All right. That's a way of tapping into the nectar. Then, I see that you are, everything is part of you. Yes, that increases the sweetness of the nectar. And finally, of course, I see, I am the source, the origin, I am the only nectar available, and there's no other. There's no participant in it. There's no one to drink it. I am that. I am that ananda, that bliss. So this is really how I would answer your question, that how do we increase our yearning? Is it through imagination? Yes, absolutely. We have to imagine something that we cannot see. And the Our imagination means our formulation of images has a corresponding emotional matching movement with it. And if we have the image without the inner movement, then it is simply academic, it's simply superficial, it's simply just a theory. When we match it with the emotions, when we get the emotions to catch up to it, then the yearning becomes a feeling, and the feeling intensifies the more that is revealed, because we know there's more to come, much, much more. We can ever explore that more and more. Also, just to continue with the responsibilities, these yajnas, we have a responsibility to the devas. We have worshipping the devas. We have a responsibility for looking after, as it were, our ancestors, honoring our ancestors. We have a responsibility for humanity. We have a responsibility for engaging in charity. That means we have an empathy for others who are less well off. And then, of course, all creatures. So it is traditional sometimes that any prasad left over would be given for the birds and for other creatures, for the ants and so on, like that. It's a wonderful concept, a wonderful understanding that there is this unity of existence, and all of it is divine, whether you call it a river, whether you call it a tree, whether you call it the sky, whether you call it the clouds, whether you call it the sun. It is all this consciousness. The sun is conscious, is the idea, according to the system. The material point of view is, well, it's just hydrogen in some state that is going into this bumping into hydrogen molecules, bumping into each other, or atoms, I should say, to make helium, and this ultimate action comes out as radiation and so on, all of these kinds of things like this. But it doesn't answer the question, why should it be like that? How do you get such arrangement? Why is it that the sun now seemingly deliberately has a life-giving element that radiates throughout the entire universe, echoing what we call God. What we call God, the divine principle, has the same elements. The same elements are echoed in the attributes of the sun. And for this reason, the primary mantra, your own name, the Gayatri mantra, you see, is honoring the sun, saluting the sun, seeing this conscious divinity within it. The moon is not just something that is made from dust and silicon. When meteorites hit the surface of the moon, it creates a crater, and it distributes silicon everywhere. And this distribution, silica, otherwise known as glass, manufactured into glass like that because of the heat. This becomes a reflective surface of the moon in these craters and these spaces. So we have made an explosion of silica, and it shines. It's not just a geological wonder. There's something much more to it. You can see it in its deeper concept, or deeper role and appearance as a personalized aspect. Why personalized? Because it is all a cosmic conscious arrangement. And when we see the synergy of it, we can either put it into the realm of pure accident, or you can say a wonderfully regulated arrangement, divine arrangement like that. And of course, we prefer to see it in this latter context, because the former context has no explanation behind it. It's a kind of random process, a kind of chaos, or a kind of, uncaused thing, kind of by chance. Just by chance, this all happened. This is the key to the two different understandings. The materialist reductionist says, by chance, capital C. but somebody else will say capital G, God. And that has more explanatory power because there's no explanation to chance. It just happened. Just accept it. Don't even inquire any further. Anyway, leave that aside. So we have to be artistic and imaginative enough, because we have the capacity to do it, to imagine the unimaginable, to put shape to our model, which itself is divinely arranged. Because your Ishtadevata is not just plucked out of the air. It is something that is psychologically, emotionally satisfying to the individual and is real, because the divine grace, the divine movement will reveal exactly that for you and fulfill your wish, and not just matching your imagination, but actually fulfilling a greater aspect of it. There was somebody who misunderstood, perhaps, my instructions with regards to meditation. So I take my Ishtadevata, I imagine it in the heart, and so on and so forth. That's all fine. But it becomes boring after a while, you know? It's because you didn't explore this Ishtadevata fully. You just dismissed it as an image and emotionally detached from it. And instead of seeing it as a reality presented, the divine arrangement presented for you, it is a living, breathing entity, and you can listen to its voice. But when you do that, you're exploring something much, much deeper than a mere image. You're exploring something that is infinite, something that appears in all the forms, something that is indescribable, something that is a being which is experienced as an element of complete fullness. Now, there's a great example of that amongst all the saints and mystics, but of course, Ramakrishna has this example from his own experience. Yearning for a vision of Mother Kali to endorse reality beyond a mere stone, basalt, a yearning, knowing that there must be a reality since other people have experienced it, and yearning for that. I myself haven't gotten it. And ultimately, it was the ultimate, absolute yearning that yielded a vision. What was the description of it? Waves of light, he describes it. Billowing waves of light from all directions engulfing me, you see. This was the exploration at much deeper level, not just the image level. The image level revealed a much more infinite and profound aspect of it, impossible to describe except in symbolic language, representative language, like, you see, like billowing waves of light, you see, so that we get we can conceptualize something that was profound and deep beyond really adequate words to describe such a thing. So when we say that God is this and that and the other, we've only touched a small corner, a small, tiny, tiny aspect of the infinite presence, which can ultimately be described unhelpfully, perhaps, as Satchit Ananda, existence itself, consciousness itself, and bliss itself. And where there is bliss, there is also infinity, because where there is oneness. If there was more than oneness in a dreamless sleep, it would not give us bliss. It would be disturbing to us. Well, I hope I managed to answer your question properly. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if there are any more questions.
I have a question, Swamiji, about the physical environment and how it influences how we think and behave. So there are some environments where, by the very context of where you are, it makes you more materialistic, or you forget to think about the spiritual aspects. And then there are some environments that are more conducive of thinking about spiritual things. So I'm trying to understand how to one extent, we can use this to set up in our homes a place that leads us to more spiritual thinking. But yeah, it would be nice if you can comment a bit about this. And should we try, for example, to meditate not only in our quiet place in the house, but maybe somewhere else where we feel quiet and we feel content? How often should we do this? I'm thinking the people used to go to the woods to disconnect from all the material things. Can you comment a bit about this, the physical environment and impact it has on us?
Well, yes. So a few comments. Even if you go to the woods or the sea or the mountains, you're taking yourself with you. So when you pack your bags to go there, you may also take your psychological baggage. And so in all of spiritual practice, it doesn't commence in the ideal environment necessarily. It, although it's helpful, of course, no doubt, but we have to have a way of seeing the obligatory environment that we have. You know, if you go and wait in the woods, it means at the same time you're coming away from what we would normally in modern language or modern living consider to be our normal way of life. So householders have children and have jobs and income and finances, and there are all of these aspects. So how long will you spend in the woods, you know? Now, this is the reason why many people in the summer say want to go on holiday, because they want to get away from their current environment and they want to enjoy something a little bit different, something where they can maybe get away from the one environment and go into some other environment. The problem is that they have to go back. So there are, in the meditation workshop I give, 18 mood creators, because most people will find it quite difficult, really, to meditate necessarily in the same place and so on, particularly if there are disturbances. If the urge for meditation comes when you're in certain environments, you have to take advantage of that and immediately meditate there. You know, there's, of course, we all know about Varanasi, one of the most ancient, if not the most ancient city still functioning in the world today. And I always remember one devotee saying, "Oh, I want to go to Varanasi," thinking that they will get some kind of spiritual upliftment from that. And I had to tell them the reality and say, yes, it's a spiritual place. Yes, there are spiritual vibrations that have been accumulated through the holiness of the city and the use of the city in that context and so on and so forth. But you'll also find cows wandering around. You'll also find filth. You'll find dirt. You'll find noise. You'll find beggars. You'll find scam artists. All kinds of manner of things you'll see. And, you know, but you see, if you take the trouble in the early morning to stand in the Ganga with your folded palms and see the rising sun and see its reflection on the waters, that period of time which is aloneness and special to you, that is where you'll find an attunement, sense of attunement. Now we have to consider the dwelling place in which we live as not our own. And so therefore, the practice of removing your shoes when you enter your house is the same as I'm entering into a sacred place. And the practice of removing your shoes is for this purpose. Of course, there are many cultures that remove their shoes for hygiene purposes. We don't want to bring the mud and the dirt from the outside into the house. But you see, when Moses stood in front of the burning bush, the divine, the face of the divine before him, Moses, take off thy shoes. The ground on which you stand is holy ground. So if we consider that the house itself is holy ground and the heart of it is the shrine, and if you set up a new house, even the first thing you have to do is set up a shrine. That is not a cluttered place, but a place where anybody in the household can go into, an internal chapel. And even if you sit there, there may be children coming in, there may be disturbance and so on and so forth, but it sets the whole atmosphere and makes your house, a divine temple. Carry it further and understand that your body itself is such a temple, and the mind is the internal sitting room of the Lord, where you can clean it through meditation and prayer and japa. So there's that aspect to it. Naturally, you will avoid any place which is obviously disturbing. The obvious example for that is if you're addicted to alcoholic drink, the worst thing you could possibly do is go into a pub where they serve drinks. Don't do it. Avoid unholy company. When you say make holy company, it's also on the other side, try to avoid, if possible, unholy company. Try to avoid situations where it is not obvious that your mind will be attuned in to the glory of the divine until you're practiced enough to see or to have that attunement in any kind of environment. So it's to create an environment that is conducive to spiritual practice. And if you don't find it necessarily there all the time, then yes, go off into nature's realms. Go off into the woods, go off into the streams. One of my favorite places in the environment of Dublin would be Glendalough. A wonderful spiritual place. Go in there, go into a church, go into a chapel, go into some holy place there. Dotted throughout Ireland, there are small shrines. If you take, for example, the Reconciliation Centre in Glendalough, there would be, it's not in Glendalough, but it'd be on the way, Glencree. Glencree is what it's called. It has an appalling history, and yet there's a divine aspect there. If you take our own ashram in Dublin, it has an appalling history, and yet it is a spiritual place. The vibration is spiritual. You walk into it, that's what you'll feel. So we set up these places, and there are enough of them to be spiritual. I was mentioning Glencree. You go down to the small stream there, and then there's a beautiful shrine to the Divine Mother, a replication of Lourdes, which is there. And people are so moved, they take personal items, rosaries, religious items, they leave them there and leave a prayer with it and so on. Everywhere in Ireland you'll see it, and I'm sure everywhere in Romania you may see it, and everywhere in France you may see it, and various places you may see it. So certainly, of course, in India, every corner you'll see it. To the extent that sometimes familiarity can breed contempt. So you may overlook the significance of this, You may have a restaurant, for example, that might serve food on a placemat with Krishna's face on it. So the significance of Krishna in that context is by and largely gone. So we have to take any means that we feel as necessary to tune our mind into the glory of the divine self. And if it requires from time to time going off into a forest area, this is just to remind you, Sri Ramakrishna's very practical recommendations for householders. And one of them is from time to time go into solitude. It's one of the reasons why we have silent retreats everywhere. Hopefully more to come this year. And so ever repeat the divine name, This is done through mantra, and if you haven't got a mantra, you select any other name. One of the intensifying elements of increasing your yearning is to continuously repeat your own sentiments about your chosen ideal. And this is called, there are many examples of that in Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, 9th chapter, 10th chapter, 11th chapter, and so on and so forth. You'll find all of these divine glories mentioned. To repeat lovingly the divine name is a wonderful, wonderful exercise. And to do it in your own language, you see, even in human relationships, you build up a love by bringing out all the qualities you see in somebody else. You see, your eyes shine like the moon, you are generous in spirit, you're loving in nature, and so on. This immediately increases our sentiment. The more we endorse, the more we engage in this kind of language, the more we are becoming devotional, closer to the object of our devotion, and so on. So take off your shoes in the house with this idea that the ground on which you stand is holy ground. Make your whole house a temple. Make the inner shrine of it, the inner heart of it, the shrine room. If you cannot afford a room separately, says Vivekananda in his Raja Yoga, then at least make a corner. And if nothing else, then somewhere else, wherever, anywhere where you can find some peace of mind. That doesn't address the question, though, of how to get the peace of mind in the first place in your so-called normal environment. So, what you do in the home, you try and duplicate in the obligatory environment that you have to operate in, such as the workplace. So the workplace itself becomes a sacred thing, particularly if your occupation is more obviously and more directly contributing toward the social welfare, such as teaching, such as nursing. There are less obvious ways, but every occupation is a service occupation of some kind. And without that particular cog in the wheel, the overall machinery, social machinery, doesn't work. We have to have accountants, we have to have doctors, we have to have lawyers, we have to have politicians, fortunately or unfortunately. We have to have civil servants, we have to have industrialists, we have to have agriculturalists, we have to have people expert in export, import, we have to have artists, we have to have scientists, we have to have athletes. All of these things, all of these components we have to have, and the way in which the social environment works well is when all of these work harmoniously, like a well-designed clock, old-fashioned clock, with its individual parts and cogs, all working together in a certain rhythm. And so this is called dharma. And we have to find our own swadharma within it, so that the workplace then becomes a sacred environment, using divine energy, and all the other aspects within it, all the other cogs in the wheel, are divinely arranged. And behind it all, we see our own loving Lord, our own loving Mother, whatever our Ishtadevata is, contained in there, peeping out, playing a certain role, asking us, do you recognize me here? Do you recognize me there? So every environment that we have, that we are normally obliged to work within, can be sanctified. And if you feel that it requires some extra addition to its sanctification, there are devices. So wearing a mala can be a device. Carrying a picture of the divine can be a device. Putting a picture on a desk of your guru or your divine Ishtadevata or whatever it is, whoever it is, can be a device. If you work in a shop and you're the shop owner, say, then having a device that reminds you constantly of the divine inputs that are necessary for abundance in your business. And for this reason, these various aspects, the kind of ray of the divine, one called Lakshmi, for example, then you'll get the abundance that comes from it. One called Ganesh, which again is to do with removing obstacles to your abundance. Let your abundance flow. And symbols of that too. Symbol of divine abundance will naturally be flow. I encourage people to put, for example, some kind of water feature in a house if you want more abundance to flow. The Chinese have caught on to this flow of energy and maybe deregistered it from its divinity and called it the feng shui, and there's a certain skill and art to it. The corresponding thing is there in India also. How you arrange your house and all this is a well understood science. So we have to take advantage of nature's natural elements and natural flows and insert consciously things which combat our troubled areas. Ekadashi, for example, you're observing a fast. Some people observe it, not knowing its significance. If you know its significance, it's much more valid, of course. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? That we have to explore and understand why it is. Yeah. A simple lighting of a lamp, for example, is there's a great deal of significance to that. And having created some shrine, making sure that you, morning and evening, say, or whenever is required, you make some ritualistic worship there, which is an example to your family, and which is another mood creator. Puja and ritual is a mood creator. It says, if you can't meditate, then endorse your intention, endorse your all your vows, all your deliberate conscious movements, all your great directions and goals and objectives and so on and so forth. Put that into physical movement. Then that it underlines the impact of it. So we have to use all these multiple devices, there's no doubt about it. And we avoid unholy company. You can't expect somebody suffering from alcoholism to recover in the environment of a place where they sell alcoholic drink, for example. To remove somebody away from that environment, and in order to get rid of this addiction, you don't suppress it, you put in another thing which is more attractive. God is more attractive than the world. When we come to this realization, then the world automatically falls away from us and God becomes the more important and significant reality. And that becomes now a movement, a natural movement, becomes a flow of devotion, a flow of energetic interest toward that. And as I said before, that yields its corresponding grace. We take one step toward the Lord, and the Lord will take 1,000 steps toward us, as it were. It's like opening a gate and allowing the flood to come through. It's this small opening we have to do, and we have to keep it open. That's called spiritual practice. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Swamiji. Beautiful answer. Thank you.
Good.
Yes, Swami. Once you said that God, that nothing comes from outside. And, I read it from another philosopher like you, and nothing comes from outside. And once you say another thing, you say there is no outside or inside for God. There is no inside or outside. So how do you, what must I understand, you know? What shall I understand with nothing coming from outside? What is the meaning?
You see, when we first think of God, the natural impulse is to think of something outside ourselves with the understanding that we are not related to anything else. We are related, of course, to our birth environment, and we are related to those who gave us birth and our family and so on and so forth. A child understands that when they're small. But you know, as a child grows, this dependency becomes less. And so there has to be a deeper understanding. Yes, we do seem to be separate. In the beginning, we have to pray to God as an external entity. God is outside us. Now, if I had a board, I'd draw a circle like this. And I would say that our beginning point of view is I am inside this circle. And inside this circle, God is therefore outside. It's a useful starting point. But you see, the more I connect with that, the more vague this circle becomes. And so the first starting point, God is away, outside, exterior to me. Through prayer, through meditation, the closer connection says, oh, God is actually here. And God is within everything, inside everything. And so we cultivate that aspect that God is inside everything. But that soon yields to that God is something flowing through everything. So we start off with outside, then inside, then through, and then as, because there's only one entity there and beyond. And so that's our process. And at the ultimate thing then is that circle that I drew with a line has gone completely, where there's no outside, there's no inside. The circle that is drawn is a mythical circle. It's a circle which is not really there. But for practical purposes, I can put it until I understand that that circle becomes a vague thing, until finally it just disappears. And so it is really an increase, but we still have to understand the principle of it. And the principle of it is that there's nothing outside. The danger of saying there's something outside means in its extreme, it's a fatalism. And you see, even well-meaning people, I heard somebody the other day saying, this happened to me, and the other person said, oh, it's your karma, must be your karma. What does that mean? I have no idea what that means. They came to me and said, is it true? I said, I don't know. I have no understanding what this means, you see, because that's a kind of fatalism. You just oh, it's your karma. A kind of fatalistic aspect which has its social danger. What's its social danger? Somebody comes to me, a beggar in the street in dire circumstances, that's your karma, and carry on and walk past. Particularly in Africa and Asia, where you have many, many people who are distressed, who are in poverty and begging and so on, you know, that's your karma. And many societies have been criticized for that kind of fatalistic aspect. There's no fatalism at all in the principle of karma. That means that every effort I make has to be my own effort. It has to be my own movement. And if I think that an angel visited me from outside, it may look like that, and I may interpret it like that. But actually, it is all internal. It is all within me. That's the fact of it. And that is the same whether whatever context. It's the same in science. In science, you won't look for something outside, some external agent. You'll have to look for something internal. The internal formula has to be applied. So I'm just looking here as I'm talking, because this is explicitly put, you see, by Swami Vivekananda in his very preface to his famous Raja Yoga. So he's saying the idea of supernatural beings may rouse to a certain extent the power of action in man, but it also brings spiritual decay. It brings dependence, it brings fear, it brings superstition. It degenerates into a horrible belief in the natural weakness of man. There is no supernatural, says the yogi, and by yogi we can include all mystics, be they Christian or otherwise. But there are in nature gross manifestations and subtle manifestations. So that is what he has to say. And he says, the subtle are the causes, the gross are the effects. The gross can be easily perceived by the senses, not so the subtle. The practice, he says, in the context of meditation, that is Raja Yoga, will lead to the acquisition of the more subtle perceptions. And I may add, with the more subtle perceptions, subtle means more inward. The more we explore truth, the more we're going inward, not outward, inward. And ultimately we realize this whole idea of inward and outward, this is a border that has gone. It is like you see in the old days in Europe, there used to be many, many different borders. There were many defining borders. There still are, of course, borders. We distinguish them by countries. This is a country and that's a country. But the European Union, you just bypasses it in a sense. So I've gone across the French border to the Swiss border, and you hardly notice there's a transition. You go from France across to Belgium, there's no border to speak of, and it's just a smooth transition. Not so now with the Brexit, because there's a clear border there now, because they've divorced themselves from the European Union. And so you see, I'll describe it more in this way. Supposing I've used this example before, supposing I'm a massive giant, something like you find in Gulliver's Travels, massive giant. And to the extent that I put my feet in the ocean, and the ocean only comes up to my ankles, and I wiggle my toes and feel the mud underneath me. Previously, I had thought there were 7 continents. But now as I look out, then how many continents are there? The one land that I'm wriggling my toes in is the same as that bump that you call a mountain. It's one land. And so the idea that there is an inside and an outside, that there is a this, there is a that, all of these goes away the more I explore, be it in spirituality or in science, by the way. So it is all internal. Everything comes from internal. All these revelations come from inside, not from outside. Yet we might interpret it. I was visited by an angel. I had a revelation from God. I saw God sitting here. I saw God sitting there. All of those in reality come from inside. These are internal, because that very God is inside you, not outside. And that applies when we see others. We see God inside, inside, inside. This is the first discipline. We have to see the immanence, what is called the immanence of God. And that immanence then becomes deeper to say that we see God through everything. Now, this in and through and as and beyond is formulated by Jesus in this language. The Father in heaven. This is the external expression. And then I'm the vine and you're the branches. This is now deepening to this, what we might call panentheism, where I see a connection with everything. One is dualism. The other is quasi-dualism, what we call Vishishtadvaita. And then there is absolute non-dualism, and Jesus expresses it. I am my Father, and then I am the vine and you are the branches, and then I and the Father are one, and we cannot interpret it as an exclusive statement. We can interpret it for all of us. I and the Father are one. That's our ultimate conclusion. Now, if you have it as a principle, it makes it easier.
Thank you, Swami.
Okay, all good. Well, we leave it there. We've exceeded our time even. We started a little late. So thank you all. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday and prayerful and sacred day. So thank you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Oh.